Well, Joe Biden went on 60 Minutes and he told a few whoppers, including his plan for world peace. We're going to fact check the president, plus some fiery debates on British television over the war between Israel and the Hamas terrorists. And you're going to love to see what Ron DeSantis did to help your fellow Americans. That's all coming up right now. Well, we love it when Joe Biden goes on 60 Minutes. First of all, it's nice to see a man of his age getting a full body massage from people who call themselves journalists. Scott Pelley was the one who drew the short straw this time. And of course, much of the discussion had to do with the war in Israel between our neighbor, our friend, our ally, the only functioning democracy in the Middle East, Israel, and a bunch of blood-savage terrorists. Let's see how the discussion went. We begin with this one.
Can you foresee U.S. troops in combat in this new Middle East war?
I don't think that's necessary. Israel has one of the finest fighting forces in the country.
Israel has one of the fine fighting forces in the country. So within the country of Israel, Israel has one of the finest fighting forces. Or maybe he meant in this country, our country. Maybe he meant the world. Here's the problem. At times like this, we shouldn't have to be trying to figure out what the leader of the free world actually meant. But here we are.
Look, this is not your father's Republican Party. 30% of it is made up of these MAGA Republicans who are maybe, democracy is something they don't look at it the same way you and I look at democracy.
Is it me? Or are you getting tired of a couple of things here? First of all, the president of the United States slandering millions and millions of Americans as being anti-democracy. And he uses this, what he thinks is a slur, MAGA Republicans. It's nice for him to qualify it as 30%, but 30% of the Republican Party is a pretty big freaking number. And this was supposed to be the unity president, wasn't it? Also, this line that he keeps repeating over and over again, it's not your father's Republican Party. It's not your father's Republican Party. Couple things you need to remember about that. First of all, your father's Republican Party, and for that matter, your grandfather's Republican Party, Joe Biden hated those guys too. I mean, he was one of the chief voices in the Senate opposing Ronald Reagan, a man who won 49 out of 50 states and is now revered as, if not the top president of the 20th century, one of the top two presidents of the 20th century. Joe Biden didn't like those guys. He's acting like, oh, those Republicans were my friends. No, they weren't. And also, if I may, Mr. President, this is not my father's Democrat Party or my grandfather's Democrat Party. In fact, my grandfather's Democrat Party was led by Harry Truman, President of the United States, the first man on the planet to recognize Israel as a legitimate country. You go take a look at what Democrats are saying now about the state of Israel. No, it's not our father's Democrat Party at all. Why don't you clean up your own house there, President Biden? All right, let's keep going.
Is Iran behind the Gaza war?
I don't want to get into classified information, but to be very blunt with you,
I don't want to get into classified information because all of that is in my garage right now next to my Camaro.
There's no clear evidence of that.
At this point, no evidence that Iran is behind any of this.
Correct. Now,
there's no clear evidence that Iran was behind any of this. Now, that's a fascinating modifier, clear evidence, because as the president is about to acknowledge, we know that Iran for decades has been funding Hezbollah and Hamas activities. Why on God's earth would this be the one operation Iran had nothing to do with?
Iran constantly supports Hamas and Hezbollah. I don't mean that, but in terms of did they have foreknowledge? Did they help plan the attack? There's no evidence of that.
There's no evidence of that. That's interesting because I'm old enough to remember 10 days ago when this was the blockbuster story from the Wall Street Journal. Iran helped plot attack on Israel over several weeks. Maybe Wall Street Journal has a better handle on the intelligence here from than the president of the United States. That's actually not outside the realm of possibility.
Would you support Israeli occupation of Gaza at this point?
I think it'd be a big mistake. Look, what happened in Gaza, in my view, is Hamas and the extreme elements of Hamas don't represent.
I'm sorry. The extreme elements of Hamas, not the school teachers from Hamas, not the peacekeepers of Hamas, not the ice cream parlor owners of Hamas. No. I just mean the extreme. I'm sorry. Can you show me the non-extreme member of Hamas? Because Hamas is, what's the word? A terrorist organization. This is great, firm, decisive leadership from our president at a time of crisis, isn't it?
Than all the Palestinian people. And I think that it would be a mistake for Israel to occupy Gaza again. But to going in and taking out the extremists, the Hezbollah is up north, but Hamas down south is a necessary requirement.
Do you get the sense that he's trying to remember his talking points as he responds to questions like this? That said, two really important things revealed there. Number one, he acknowledged the lie that there is an occupation going on in Gaza, right? I mean, by saying that it would be a mistake to go in and occupy Gaza, it's an acknowledgement that all these people who are protesting in the streets, and for that matter, in the halls of Congress, if you're a Democrat and a member of the squad who say this is about occupation, well, that's a lie, because Gaza isn't occupied at all, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't be a debate as to whether Israel should go back and reoccupy Gaza. That's number one. But number two, I think it would be a big mistake for Israel to do that. Big mistake. You don't want to make Hamas angry. You don't want to make things rough on your side. You go in and occupy Gaza, and they might get so mad that they're going to slaughter 1,000 of your innocent people and kidnap them and rape them. And they just did that. I mean, what, you're going to make matters worse? How much worse can it get? More from your president.
There's limited fighting already on the northern Israeli border, and I wonder, what is your message to Hezbollah and its backer, Iran?
Don't
come across the border. Don't escalate this war.
That's right.
Well, thank God journalist Scott Pelley was there to finish the answer for the president. Don't what? Don't mix plaids and stripes in a suit. Don't wear a polka dot tie with a striped busy pattern on your shirt. What do you mean don't? Don't wear white shoes after Labor Day? Don't is the message. That's the clear, cohesive message from the president. So Scott Pelley had to jump in there and clean up the mess. But if that looks familiar to you, not the president being an incoherent and undecisive moron. No, that's obviously something familiar to you. No, this answer to a question, don't. Well, let me take you back about a year ago to 60 Minutes, President Biden sitting for an interview with the same guy, Scott Pelley. Take a look. You're going to see this supercut here put together because their suits change and the color of their ties change because these are two different clips. Watch.
And I wonder, Mr. President, what you would say to him if he is considering using chemical or tactical nuclear weapons.
Don't.
And I wonder, what is your message to Hezbollah and its backer, Iran?
Don't.
I mean, it's bad when you're repeating the same asinine statement a year later. You can't come up with a new asinine statement for the president that is incoherent and weak? I guess not. By the way, a hat tip to Maze Moore, that's Maze on Twitter, who found that clip. Well done. Thank you for your support there. All right, and let's wind things up here with the president's plan for 4 more years of a Biden administration.
Are you sure that you want to run again?
Yes, because I'm sure. Look, when I ran, I said the world's at an inflection point. The world's changing, but we have an opportunity to make it. So imagine if we were able to succeed in getting the Middle East put in place where we have normalization of relations. I think we can do that. Imagine what happens if we, in fact, unite all of Europe and Putin is finally put down where he cannot cause the kind of trouble he's been causing. We have enormous opportunity.
All right, so a couple of things on this, if I may. First of all, that is a hell of a campaign promise. Give me 4 more years and I'll give you world peace. Secondly, when he says imagine a world where we don't have chaos and bloodshed in the Middle East and Europe is in line and Putin is marginalized and put in a corner. Well, yeah, we can imagine that world. It's exactly what it looked like 3 years ago. All of these conflicts and all of this bloodshed and all of this warfare and Putin getting enriched on the price of oil, which is sky high, and Hamas using Iranian money to kill innocent Israelis. That all happened under this guy's watch. Give me 4 more years and I'll clean up the mess that I created. That's what he's asking for. And one other thing. He's asked whether he wants to be president for 4 more years. And his answer is, I'm going to clean up the mess of the world. Did you notice that his answer had nothing to do with you specifically? With Americans? He didn't say, keep me in here so I can fix the economy and bring the price of gas and milk and eggs down. He didn't say, keep me here so I can give us a robust jobs market where people can get jobs that actually pay well and get you raises that are higher than the rate of inflation. He didn't say, keep me in here and I'm going to make sure that our border is secure. He didn't say anything that anyone would characterize as literally America first. In fact, America didn't even come up. All right, let's turn now to, speaking of the last president and America first, we have in front of us a group of billionaire tech tycoons who have a weekly podcast. They're all liberals from San Francisco and the Bay Area. They're all outspoken critics of Donald Trump and the Republican Party. And yet, look at this moment from last week's episode.
The most important thing that is resoundingly obvious about Jared Kushner is that he is incredibly thoughtful and incredibly competent. And
right.
Why did we have to spend years being fed all of these stupid lies? Because one can judge for oneself, but Jared Kushner is thoughtful, he's smart. And I thought to myself, I was fed all these lies for years about how this guy was like moping around in the shadows and this and that. And it was all not true.
Well, no, when I say it's non-traditional, if you sent, any president's son-in-law, daughter-in-law, whatever child to go to the Middle East, on its surface, this seems insane. But in fact, they did good work. And so it's not traditional. It's not what you would expect.
He's thoughtful and competent. That's what I thought after.
That's what I got out of it as well, is that he's thoughtful and competent.
The thing that was smart about Trump was that he was willing to do business.
Yes.
He
absolutely.
Was willing to negotiate, and he didn't feel the need to make these moral condemnations all the time. He was willing to meet with Kim Jong-un. He was willing to meet with Putin and Xi Jinping, and he avoided criticizing them personally. He didn't call them dictators. He talked about how smart they are.
Yeah.
It's the art of the deal, right? I mean, at the end of the day, he's looking to do business. And we need a little bit more of that. And I think this is why Jared Kushner was successful, is he went in there with the mindset of a businessman.
Yeah.
How do we find something that's beneficial to both sides?
Totally right. I think that when Trump was elected, I was told that it was the end of the world. And that's what I thought. And I'd already underwritten him as an F. Okay. And then 4 years into the presidency, he was probably like a C in my mind. And then as I get a little bit of distance away, I realized, no, hold on a second. This guy was like a B plus. Like, he was pretty good. And unfortunately, the few things that if he could have just pushed through would have really saved America. The biggest one being these 100-year bonds. It would have kept America from getting to the precipice of fiscal ruin. And we'd be in a highly different situation. And I'm not sure we could have ever given him credit for it. But the further and further I get away from him and the less emotional I am, he did a pretty good job. He was a pretty good president.
Wow. That's amazing. By the way, that gentleman in particular was one of the early venture capitalist investors in Facebook. He's been highly critical of Mark Zuckerberg, by the way, in his operations of that social media platform. He was also a big supporter of Michael Bloomberg for president, a liberal Democrat. And, well, he's a self-made billionaire, so he can go ahead and afford to say things like that and not lose all of his friends in San Francisco. Well, I mean, he will lose all of his friends in San Francisco, but he's got enough money that he can buy new ones. Now we turn to the United Kingdom and a couple of really fiery exchanges between journalists there, anchors in studio reporting on the war between Israel and Hamas terrorists, and the guests that they have on their programs. Now, this first guest in particular is a really important one. He is the former prime minister of Israel. And, well, take a look at this.
And what about those Palestinians in hospital who are on life support, and babies and incubators whose life support and incubator will have to be turned off because the Israelis have cut the power to Gaza?
Are you seriously keep on asking me about Palestinian civilians? What's wrong with you? Have you not seen what happened? We're fighting Nazis. We don't target them. Now, the world can come and bring them anything they want. If you want to bring them electricity, I'm not going to feed electricity or water to my enemies. If anyone else wants, that's fine. We're not responsible for
all right, so this is, as you can see on the Chiron there from Sky News, this is Naftali Bennett, former Prime Minister of Israel, with an extraordinary slapback to this talking head who sits there in a cushy studio in London, wringing his hands about the death of civilians in Gaza who were warned for days that a military strike was going to happen, certainly nothing that the Hamas terrorists afforded to innocent Israeli children before their attack. And also, by the way, the Hamas terrorists who run Gaza had been blocking the roads to keep civilians from being able to evacuate. And so here he is just fed up saying, they're Nazis. Did we concern ourselves with this during World War II? Well, watch, it gets even better.
This is the point.
But you
this
keep
is the
on,
point.
you,
No,
I want to tell you, no, man, no, listen, you listen
you're
to me
raising
right
your
now.
voice, and
I've
we're
heard
trying.
you enough.
No, I understand. We're trying to have a
I've heard a lot of
conversation
you.
here. Listen, this
No,
is my
you're
program.
not
This is
having
my
a-
show, and I am asking the
That's
questions.
exactly-
You're raising your
But
voice,
it's my
and I've
country,
asked you,
and
and we've already stopped,
people-
please, and let me finish. We've already distinguished
Shame on
between
you,
Hamas.
mister. I want to tell you, shame on you.
You're trying to speak over me.
We
No.
are not. Shame on you.
It's nothing
I'm
about
I
Shem. We're
was a
trying to
prime
have a
minister.
conversation
There's
about a very
absolutely
serious
shame.
situation
Because-
here,
because-
and you are
because
refusing
you
to address.
It's nothing about shame. Well, of course, because he has no shame to even present it in this way. And the fact that he's removed himself and tried to be so disjointed and unemotional while talking to a man who was literally standing in a war zone and mourning the death of 1,000 of his countrymen who were murdered and raped and kidnapped, and worse, all three in some cases. And he's getting angry because he wants the conversation to be about the casualties during the response. I mean, why bring this man onto the program to give his genuine opinion about this if you're just going to try to shout over him?
Jump over immediately, and again, you
Absolutely
use the
not.
Palestinian narrative.
You are
They
incorrect.
are responsible, because I can tell you that when the UK,
Absolutely
when Great
not.
Britain was fighting the Nazis during World War II, no one asked what's going on in Dresden. It was the Nazis targeting London, and you targeted Dresden. So
Listen.
shame on you if you go on with that false narrative.
We're not talking about that, and in
I
hindsight,
understand
many
from your
people have
perspective-
listen.
from
And in
your
hindsight,
perspective,
many
it's okay
people have
to go in
readdressed
and
that
sever,
kind of
the
carpet
heads of
bombing.
babies. Oh, I see. Now you're Mr. Clean. Shame on you.
Absolutely
We
not. And
will
I'm not.
not
Listen,
target-
Mr.
I
Bennett, I am
guess-
not in the
in
military.
your-
I am a journalist.
You're not-
I'm a journalist. No, he's arguing with him and taking a side, and it's a great point. I'm sorry, you had to deal with the Blitzkrieg over London, so then you carpet bombed Dresden, and now 70 years later, you're going to say, oh, maybe on second thought, we shouldn't have done that. They're in the middle of this right now. He's right. Shame on you. And look at how, well, I'll let this finish up so you can see, under the guise of journalism, he's basically arguing on behalf of the Hamas terrorists. And one other quickie, take a look at the Chiron there as this rolls. 447 children among the 1,400 Palestinians killed. By the way, that number was fed to them by Hamas, the aforementioned terrorists.
asking you questions. Are you going to let me ask you a question, or you continue shouting at me? We've already distinguished between Hamas and the Palestinians. I'm asking you very directly. Very directly.
What do you want to ask?
is going to be done to make sure that those innocent people don't get killed as innocent Jewish people were killed on Saturday?
Well, we're going to target Hamas, and we're telling Hamas that if you use anyone as your human shield and you're going to shoot at us using human shields, that it's their responsibility. Listen, mister, if someone is shooting at your children and hiding behind a human shield, will you shoot back or not? I'm asking you a question. Someone's shooting at your children but hiding behind civilians. What's the answer? What would you do?
Mr. Bennett, I'm not here to answer your questions. I've asked you your questions and you have not answered them directly.
Because he's a journalist, after all. That's great stuff. And by the way, it's a great insight. You know, we think that the media is biased here in America, and they are. But when you go over to London, it's even worse. All right, that brings us to a guy that is from London and appears on BBC all the time. We're used to seeing him here on Fox News Channel. He's Douglas Murray, and he is asked about proportionality. Do you hear that a lot? Proportionality. Oh, this Israel response is not proportional. Well, take it away, Mr. Murray.
The siege of Gaza, cutting off all supplies of fuel, the last electricity plant, that's gone. There's no electricity, there's no running water, there is no food going in, there are no other fuel supplies going in. Borders closed at Egypt as well. Bizarrely little criticism of Egypt for that, interestingly. Is that, and while raining down missiles on buildings which they know are going to kill civilians?
Can I just pause here for a second? What is this upset? We're a week past the terror attacks. It's only been a week. There's still hostages being held, innocent hostages, including Americans, that are being held by these Hamas terrorists. Why the obsession on British television with civilians who might get caught in the crossfire of the response, knowing full well that the Israeli military have given warnings for days for civilians to get out of the area, knowing full well that Hamas terrorists actually put their operations and shoot their missiles from next to hospitals and schools and in civilian areas so that they can draw the military response to their innocent civilians. Why are they obsessed with this? Why is this the only issue? It has literally been a week since these terror attacks.
We know hundreds and hundreds of civilians have already died, many of them children. Is that a reasonable, proportionate, and moral response by Israel?
There is some deep perversion in Britain whenever Israel is involved in a conflict, and it is the word you just used, proportion, proportionate, proportionality. Only Britain is really obsessed with this. I've heard it for the last few days incessantly. Proportionality in conflict rarely exists. But if we were to decide that we should have this fetish about proportionality, then that would mean that in retaliation for what Hamas did in Israel on Saturday, Israel should try to locate a music festival in Gaza, for instance, and good luck with that. Should try to find a music festival in Gaza and rape precisely the number of women that Hamas raped on Saturday. Kill precisely the number of young people that Hamas killed on Saturday. They should find a town of exactly the same size as a town like Sderot, where I've been many times myself, and make sure they go to door and kill precisely the correct number of babies that Hamas killed in Sderot on Saturday, and shoot in the head precisely the same number of old age pensioners as were shot in Sderot on Saturday, just to choose one town. Proportionality in conflict is a joke. And it's a very strange British concept which we've had, that only the Israelis in a conflict, when they are attacked, are expected to have precisely the proportionate response.
No,
I don't believe
I'm going to challenge you on that, Douglas, because I do think when we had, the invasions of Afghanistan and of Iraq, a lot of people were discussing Afghanistan had huge numbers of countries involved, Iraq less so, obviously, but there was still discussion about whether or not the number of civilian deaths, that this was proportionate to the threat as perceived by.
By the way, I love this as her defense. Oh, no. We hold America up to this stupid standard, too. When they went into Afghanistan and we joined them. Yeah, so we were only supposed to kill exactly 3,000 civilians in response to 9/11? Or we were only supposed to find the two tall buildings in Afghanistan, tallest buildings in the world, like there were in New York City or close to it, and fly airplanes into that for a proportional response. You see how maddening and morally moronic this is? You have to be a moral moron to actually think that you're making a point when you say, well, this is not a proportionate response. Good for Douglas Murray. Let's let him have the last word here.
By America,
No,
by other countries.
We didn't say that the death toll in Afghanistan had to be precisely the death toll, for instance, in the Twin Towers in New York. We didn't take that view. By the way, the always has to be said, the difference between the Western way of war and the Hamas terrorist way of war is that their objective is to kill civilians. The objective of Hamas is to kill innocent people. The objective in conflict of the United States, the United Kingdom, Israel, and other civilized democracies is to kill as few innocent people as possible. It cannot be said enough that Israel tries to use the IDF to protect its citizenry. Hamas uses the citizenry to try to protect Hamas. Israel precisely uses precision-guided missiles in order to try to limit civilian casualties. But I have no doubt that after the atrocities of the last week, the appetite of the Israeli public and military and politicians to continue this precision game will, of course, change.
Yeah, good for Douglas Murray. Great stuff there. Moral clarity is a beautiful thing and intoxicating for that matter. Here's something to bear in mind here. It's always very easy to not be held up to any moral standards when you actually don't have any moral standards. All right, it brings us now to another British newscaster challenging a Polish politician. Now, Poland is suddenly under fire for not accepting any Muslim refugees over the years, like other European nations have done. And, you know, as we saw all of these protests in the streets with some blood-curdling things being chanted in London, in Germany, in Paris, and yes, sadly, even here in America, the question of why we didn't see those protests in Poland has come up. And here's this exchange.
How many refugees has Poland taken?
0.
And you're proud of that?
If you are asking me, if you are asking me about Muslims illegal immigration, none, not even one will come to Poland. Not even one if it's illegal. We took over 2 million Ukrainians who are working, who are peaceful in Poland. We will not receive even one Muslim because this is what we promised.
But I asked not about illegal immigrants. I asked about refugees.
She's argumentative. We'll get to her in a moment, but let's just be clear here. Refugees, by definition, are in fact illegal immigrants. They flood into a country seeking refuge, seeking asylum, but they're not going through the normal channels of immigration. They're asking to be permitted to stay. It's supposed to be for a temporary period, by the way, but it never ends up that way. They're asking to be permission to stay in a country where they did not actually formally go through the process of immigration. That is illegal immigration. So this gentleman is answering the question properly. By the way, his name is Dominik Tarzyński, and he's a member of the European Parliament on behalf of Poland.
And Jean-Claude Juncker, the Commission President, says that you're racist. You sound proud of the fact that you haven't taken any refugees.
Of course, because this is what our people are expecting from.
Can I just push back on that question for a moment? You're being called racist. Now, he just said that he accepted, the country, Poland, accepted 2 million refugees from Ukraine right on their border after Russia invaded them. You would think that they should get credit for that. But he's being racist for not accepting Muslim refugees. Could I just ask a quick question here? And I'm sure that this very bright newscaster from the BBC will have an answer. I'm sorry, what race is Muslim? I'm sorry, is that a race? Are Christians a race? Are Jewish people? Well, actually, I guess technically Jewish people would be the outlier. You can be a member of the Jewish race as well as practice the religion, but not always. Buddhist, Hindu, is that a race? What do you mean racist? You can be Muslim without being Arab or African or whatever other race that you want to point out there. Let's now let him answer this question about whether he's racist for driving. Oh, and one other, well, I'll get to the other part in a moment.
Of course, because this is what our people expecting from our government. That's number one. This is why our government was elected. But this is why Poland is so safe. This is the reason why we have not even one terrorist attack. Look at the streets in Poland, and we can be called populists, nationalists, racists. I don't care. I care about my family and about my country.
I mean, you can go ahead and argue with that, but I don't quite see what the argument might be. Call me racist, call me nationalist. I care about my family and I care about my country. And it's pretty rich coming from the Brits. Listen, the British may want to lecture somebody from Poland about how they're obligated to bring in Muslim refugees from predominantly Muslim countries. But unlike Great Britain, Poland doesn't have a history of colonizing those countries. Maybe England and the United Kingdom feel a special obligation to those countries that they colonized for decades. And so they're opening up their borders. Fine. Why should Poland be obligated to do that? And let's get to that reporter. If she looked familiar to you, you're right. She is that same woman who had this legendary debate, argument, it was supposed to be an interview, with the one and only Jordan Peterson.
Cited freedom of speech in that. Why should your right to freedom of speech trump a trans person's right not to be offended?
Because in order to be able to think, you have to risk being offensive. I mean, look at the conversation we're having right now. You know, like, you're certainly willing to risk offending me in the pursuit of truth. Why should you have the right to do that? It's been rather uncomfortable.
Well, I'm very glad I put you on the spot.
Well,
I'm very glad that I have
but you get my point. You get my point. It's like you're doing what you should do, which is digging a bit to see what the hell's going on. And that is what you should do. But you're exercising your freedom of speech to certainly risk offending me. And that's fine. I think more power to you as far as I'm concerned.
So you haven't sat there and I'm just trying to work that out. I mean,
hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again. Because a vision softly creeping.
Ha, gotcha.
You have got me. I'm trying to work that through in my head. Yeah, it took a while.
Yeah, and thank you and well done to the folks over at World Power that put that amusing clip together with the legendary Simon and Garfunkel. That's who she is, and she's just maintaining her brand, I suppose, over there on the BBC. Meanwhile, back here at home, you may be wondering why so many Americans are still trapped in Israel without the Biden administration doing anything to try to get them home. And well, you won't be alone. Many of us are wondering that. It's a repeat, isn't it, of what happened in Afghanistan. It also happened earlier this year in the African subcontinent. It also happened in Ukraine. Have you noticed that with this Biden administration, whenever military flare-ups occur around the world, they're very quick to pull out and abandon Americans left behind? Well, Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida was having none of it, and he made an announcement over the weekend.
We're here at Tampa Airport. We are having our first flight of people being rescued from Israel. It has landed. Over 260 people that wanted to get back to the United States and couldn't do it. There was a devoid of leadership, so we stepped up and led. We're happy to be able to deliver this. So we're getting ready to welcome them back to the United States of America.
That's right. About 300 Americans who were stuck in Israel, they asked for help. And Governor DeSantis from Florida was able to marshal some resources at his disposal and actually help airlift them out. Why isn't the Biden administration doing this? I mean, the last report I saw from the Biden administration was that, yeah, there are certain channels that you can get through to get home. But did you know that American citizens, before they're able to take any of the transportation that the State Department is arranging, if they're able to arrange any of that transportation, the American citizen has to sign a promissory note promising to pay the federal government back for their travel expenses so they can get out of the war-torn nation that they found themselves in? That's something else, isn't it? Now, a lot of people were wondering why Biden isn't doing this, why other people aren't doing this, why we aren't getting more out of this. And what's interesting to me is and this may be why it's been hard to get any action here in America, because take a look at what happened when Governor DeSantis made this announcement over the weekend. This was October 12th. You can see this tweet here. He says, "Today I signed an executive order authorizing rescue operations in Israel to bring Floridians home and transport supplies to our allies." So this was several days ago. "We will not leave our residents behind. To the many Floridians who are stuck in Israel trying to get home, help is on the way." All right, so he makes that announcement several days ago. And he gets a response from former Congressman, former Republican, Adam Kinzinger, of all people, who responded, as you can see, "You're a governor. You have no power here." Eye roll. Why does he talk like a 14-year-old girl, this Adam Kinzinger guy? So Ron DeSantis is just a governor, and he doesn't have any power here. And he was criticized when he made an announcement saying that he was going to do whatever he could to help bring Floridians back to his home state. And let's just remind you how that ended up.
We're here at Tampa Airport. We are having our first flight of people being rescued from Israel. It has landed. Over 260 people that wanted to get back to the United States and couldn't do it. There was a devoid of leadership, so we stepped up and led. We're happy to be able to deliver this. So we're getting ready to welcome them back to the United States of America.
Has Adam Kinzinger been right about anything in the last 10 years? That's sad and embarrassing for him. Good on you, Governor DeSantis. That's a nice little plane you got back there, Air DeSantis. If other people have any planes at their disposal that they could use for such great purposes, they should probably jump into the mix here. All right, that's it today, but we'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for watching. And by the way, I'm Larry O'Connor. I appreciate you sharing, watching, and subscribing wherever you're watching us, and we'll be back next time.